Well, good evening, everyone. We are glad that you've joined us tonight for this conversation on finances during COVID-19. This is the second conversation that we're having around finances during this time. We're glad that you've joined us. I'm Kent Salati. I serve as one of the Bridge Conference ministers of the Southern New England Conference, and I'd like to introduce my colleagues to you. David Cleaver Bartholomew is the ACM for Stewardship and Financial Development. Lee Gagan is the Fundraising and Development Specialist.
Hi.
Angie Menke-Ballou is the pastor of the Catuit Church and member of the Southern New England Conference Board of Directors. Charlie Kuchenbrod is the Executive Associate Conference Minister. And Mary Nelson is a regional minister. So we're glad you've all joined us. We are excited for this conversation that will be together for this next hour. And I'll talk with you about process in a minute, but we would like to call on Mary Nelson to open us with a word of prayer. Mary.
Thank you, Kent. Good evening, friends. Will you join me in prayer? Holy One, you have gathered us across the miles and across the airwaves and ether to join us as one people in this time, in these questions, in this struggle, to make God's love and justice real. This evening, we ask your blessing on this time of learning as we wonder and ask and wrestle with questions of generosity and with questions of fundraising and with questions of sensitivity and with practical questions as well. Help us to listen, help us to learn, help us to be open to your leading, and help us always, in all that we do, be faithful to you and generous with one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mary. I wanted to tell the participants, the folks attending this webinar, that we are recording the webinar. And at the bottom of the webinar, there is a box that says Q&A. And we're going to experiment tonight with Q&A in a way that I have not experienced it before. So this will be fun. If you have a question, you can type it in the Q&A box, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. And then people can look at the questions that are being raised by your companion attendees. So before you add your question, you might want to see what other questions have been asked. And if you find a version of the question that you're thinking of asking, you can vote on that question, and it will raise to the top magically of a lot of people want us to respond or have a response to that particular question. So this is a new feature for me, maybe not for you. So if you have questions during the panelists' presentations, you are able to ask them. And then if you'd like to vote on moving that question further up the question box, you can do so. So I'd ask you only to add a question if you don't see that question already listed. If it's already listed, just click thumbs up. I want that to move up the list, and we will try our best at answering questions that arise. So we're going to ask our panelists to open up with a few remarks, just very brief remarks about some topics that we think we should be addressing, and topics that also have come as a result of some of the questions we've gotten in advance. So David, why don't you go first?
Okay, one of the things that we thought that we would address tonight was to let you know what the results were of the all-church, all-conference survey that we took back in early to mid-April, especially how it pertains to the financial condition of our churches. And now that date is fairly important because the PPP program had just been introduced about a week beforehand, and some of our churches were in the process of applying it. But what we found out, we had 262 churches respond. We had comments that were registered by 84 of our churches. Interestingly enough, 40% of our churches back as of mid-April said that they were doing okay financially, and that this was primarily because a number of their congregants had either increased their pledges or paid their pledges for the entire year early. And we also found out that churches that had online electronic giving fared very well and did much better, as did churches that had strong leadership. The leadership does make a big difference. Churches where there was strong leadership, either from the pastor or from the church's financial leadership, and who have openly and effectively addressed the situation before them. They talked about the elephant in the room, have been clear about the church's need, and intentionally asked for people's monetary support for the church and the church's mission, and provide multiple ways for them to do so, especially through electronic giving, are some of the positives that we took away from the survey. On the negative side, about half of our churches, 48%, said they were not doing particularly well. The primary reasons for this was the loss of rental revenue that they have incoming from their church. Obviously, with the building being closed, they were not able to receive that rental income anymore. That was a large number of our churches. There were also significant causes of revenue loss, include the decline in investment income, loss of fundraiser income, lost income from either a thrift shop that they had or a daycare or a preschool, loss of loose plate offerings that they would get on a Sunday. Only 5 churches mentioned that their regular general giving had been down by that point. So a couple of other takeaways that we had, or a couple of other concerns that we have, because this was so early, is how long are these conditions going to last? Now that we've moved from the very early stages of the pandemic and church and no church buildings being open to the middle stages of this, how long is this going to last and what is going to happen? But again, the best takeaways are multiple ways of giving to the church and allowing people to give, plus church leadership makes all the difference in the world.
Great. Thank you, David. And Lee, some opening comments.
So I'm going to quote Andrew Warner. He's the Generosity Outreach Officer at the national setting. And about abundance and generosity, he says, the practice of generosity, like all our spiritual practices, deepens the sense of hope, purpose, and meaning in people. And despite the fact we are in the midst of a pandemic, we are seeing extravagant generosity right now. There are many people struggling financially, physically, emotionally, and so on, but there are others who have the ability to give right now. More importantly, they want to give right now. So it could be a stimulus check, or as David mentioned, a gift that may normally come at year's end, or perhaps money that would normally be somebody's weekly contribution at church. There are people out there who want to be generous, and it's important that we make those opportunities available. It's hard to ask for money, but it's important, and we are doing a service by asking. Here in the Southern New England Conference, we started off the new year and our new conference with the RIP Medical Debt Appeal. Then, several weeks later, before our April 17th deadline, things changed. There were lots of questions to be asked and answered. Do we continue to raise money? The answer was yes, and in most cases, the answer to that question is yes, continue your fundraising. Another question was, do we extend our deadline? The answer to that was also yes, we extended it about a month. We weren't sure what would happen, and you know what? We were witness to extravagant generosity. Churches donating, associations committing to match contributions, nearly 100% participation from our staff at the Southern New England Conference. families seeing the value in the appeal and collecting money as a birthday gift, people doing what they can where they can. And then one other different type of generosity I'd like to share with you tonight is generosity of resources. So we're seeing things like free conferences, or free concerts, informational and educational webinars like tonight. But one I'd like to share with you is a free resource for grant funding research. We heard from quite a few of you looking for further information about how to apply for grants. One of the hardest parts, especially for a religious organization, is finding the right grant for which you can apply. And oftentimes those tools cost money. But right now, Candid, which was formerly the Foundation Center, is offering a free tool, and we will send you the link following the webinar, where you can search for grants for which you can apply. And you can search by keyword, by geographic region. It's a great tool. It's how I find most of the grants that I apply for. So I highly encourage you all to take some time and check it out.
Thank you so much, Lee. Angie, what would you say to us tonight?
Hi, I'm grateful to be here with you. I'm coming from the local church perspective. So I am a local church pastor, a solo pastor. And the church that I'm serving in, we have done a great deal of work around generosity and giving since I've been here. So I've been here 8 years, and this year we passed the milestone that we doubled our pledging in the 8 years since I was here. And a lot of that was driven by my experience as an associate pastor at my previous church. They didn't have enough money to pay me, and that created a lot of stress for me as a young mom, and a lot of existential stress in our family. And so when I came to this church and we were facing a deficit budget, we decided that we would focus on that. And the first year that we focused on it, we used a lot of the resources that you'll find on the Southern New England Conference website, about telling our story, about inviting generosity, about thanking people. And we read the book, Ask, Thank, Tell. And out of that, someone on my stewardship team said in church that she was doubling her pledge. And that set us on a stage, on a path towards raising our generosity. And we were just about to launch a public phase of a capital campaign on Palm Sunday, but things changed a little bit. So we're still silently in our capital campaign. So I feel like I'm navigating many of the same things that local church pastors and people in finance are doing at their local church. We have questions about our fundraisers, and we have questions about our future, but we have seen strong giving, and part of that is that we have invited people to be generous, and people have responded in beautiful ways.
Great, thank you, Angie. Charlie.
I have an update on the Paycheck Protection Program. Many of our churches applied and received these loans. There are still funds available from the second round of funding. I found various numbers in different news sources, but in excess of $100 billion are still available. And people have until June 30th to apply. So if you have not applied for a grant, you should certainly consider doing so. So long as you are forecasting that you're going to be facing a financial challenge this year or potential financial difficulties. It is not a barrier to application if you have some cash reserves or unrestricted funds functioning as endowment. It is prudent to hold cash reserves, and so long as exhausting those reserves or losing the income from your unrestricted funds functioning as endowment would cause financial distress, you can certify that the loan is necessary due to economic uncertainty for you to sustain your operations. In addition, the Small Business Administration has determined that for loans under $2 million, they're going to deem that all of these certifications were made in good faith. So they're not going to be auditing or questioning smaller organizations about that. Some people are concerned because they've heard of prosecution for fraud, but that is not a question of the certification. Fraud is, for instance, when you take the loan proceeds and you move them into your personal account rather than using it for the organization. That will get you in trouble. It seems likely that Congress is going to continue to tweak the rules for loan forgiveness and expand or extend the amount of time you have to spend the money and qualify for forgiveness, as well as add some additional flexibilities. So there still is an opportunity here that is worth taking advantage of. There's the information about the application and the application process, the forgiveness application, and is on our website, along with links to several resources that can guide you step by step through the process. Some churches discovered they were not eligible for a loan because they treat their staff as independent contractors. I want to take this moment to say that in almost all cases, that's misclassifying your staff. In almost all cases, church staff are employees and should be paid by W-2s. So that may be something you want to review. So again, there's still an opportunity here until June 30th. Lots of information to support your application on our website.
Thank you, Charlie. And a reminder that our website is filled with good information, www.sneucc.org. Remember that you can use the Q&A box to ask your questions. One brave soul has already gotten a question asked and answered by two of us. And Mary, please, your opening comments.
Well, and that question is a great segue to my opening comments, which is a continuation of an announcement that we've made already about the Stewardship Book Club that we're offering. We're providing or creating a resource to bring stewardship chairs, clergy, anybody who would like to learn more about stewardship in the local church, bring these folks together and create both an educational resource and a chance for conversation together. We're going to begin our book club with the classic book, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate by Cliff Christopher. And then our second book is going to be Ask, Thank, Tell by Charles Lane, which is something we had been talking about, and then hearing Angie's great testimony about the usefulness of that book, we decided, yep, let's go with that one for number 2. So there's information on our website about how to join the book club, how to sign up for it. And so you can find that under the events page, I believe, on our website is where that information is stored. Our first gathering is going to be June 8, which is a Monday. We'll be gathering for 3 Mondays, every other Monday in a row. So June 8, June 22, and July 6th to talk about Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. And then depending on who is part of that conversation and if they need to take a little break for July, or we'll figure that out. Ask, Thank, Tell will be our next book, and we will continue offering that book group as long as folks are excited and interested in continuing to learn. So if you've got questions about that are not offered on our website, there is an email address on the website. I believe it's Karen Metho who is gathering information about who's interested in joining and making sure that you get on our list and we're able to communicate with you directly. Check out all the info on the website that we've got. And if you've got questions, Karen is the person to start with, and David and I will see what we can do.
Great. Thank you. So we have had some questions that have been sent to us in advance, and we want to try to answer a few of those. We also are getting some questions. Remember to use the Q&A box. David, you want to take on one of the questions, or how do you want to proceed from here? You got on mute. You still have to unmute.
I can answer the question about the
Thank you.
grant. I saw
Yeah,
the
go
question.
ahead.
We want to do
Yep.
that. So the national setting just announced that they'll be offering financial assistance to local churches whose ministries have been challenged by the coronavirus pandemic. So they have collectively identified $2.6 million in relief, 1.5 million in loans that will be administered through the Cornerstone Fund, and another 1.1 million in micro grants. So that's going to open on Monday, June 1st, the application process. And there's a few different grants that are available. One is for operational support. So that might be helpful to replace some of the money that may have been lost in rental income. There are also grants for congregations of color and ethnic minority congregations in the UCC. There's community garden grants. There are grants specifically for clergy who are facing a difficult time right now. And there are also low interest sustainability loans in partnership with the Cornerstone Fund. The website is very clear with what they're looking for. I clicked on a few of the grants. Some of them you can see what the application looks like right now, and that will give you an idea of how much information you're going to need. But basically it'll be things like what your budget is and a little bit about your church, your organization. But check that out Monday. They're opening the application process, and there's lots of information on the website, ucc.org.
Great, thanks, Lee. David, you're unmuted.
I am unmuted, and I was going to say that if you could send me a question that was pre-done, I would be happy to answer it. I don't see any in the queue. Oh, wait, one method of online giving, but are challenged by the extra time it takes to process donations from this source. Is anyone else experiencing that? That, I think, would be a really good question for the collective wisdom of the churches out there. Is anybody else having this difficulty right now?
I would just say, yes, we are. So both churches I've served we've had a long process of being able to give online giving. To both the finance committees of those churches, I've said, this is the only check that I write. And so it took about 5 years for us to go towards PayPal at the church that I'm serving, but my finance committee still really wanted people to give by stock option. And so we couldn't really publicize it. So, but we were so grateful that we were ready to receive donations online when this happened, because we have been receiving a lot of donations online, and we do a call to offering every week, and people post the link to that giving. But we are finding that it does take a little longer to process. And I think it's because it's so new. And also, I don't know what the case is at your church, but our financial secretary isn't in the office. And so a lot of the access to things isn't the way we normally do things. And so I find it like many of the things in pandemic time, things are slower and a little more frustrating than what they have been. And so just know you're not alone. We are also going through it at our church. And I think that as we move through this, we'll get better processes of how to deal with online donations and how to deal with donations in new ways.
I have heard that for recurring regular gifts that come in online, that can in fact simplify the accounting and record keeping once you learn how to navigate the system. So I think we're all on a learning curve. And so in the early phase, there may be extra work, and I believe we'll find ways to improve processes as we go along to make it less of a burden. But we need to recognize the commitment and time and effort of our volunteers working in financial areas, and recognize them at the same time that we recognize that we need to create these new options for giving in order to move ahead. Not moving ahead with online giving options is really not a choice that's a wise or viable choice.
So one of our attendees is asking about online giving. They have not yet, as a congregation, I believe that means, entered the world of online giving and not sure where to start. Angie, you want to take a crack at that and let others as well?
Sure, I think there are many different options for online giving. We chose to go with PayPal because we thought people were familiar with it. And they have, you can sign up as a nonprofit. You just need to submit your nonprofit information, which took a little bit longer for signing up, but maybe by a week. And so you have a better rate. But we have found in this time that people really are grateful for an opportunity to give online, and we've received new gifts. I have heard from friends and colleagues who are using Tithely, where people can text and give. I haven't used that personally, but that might be a good option to investigate as well.
I could speak to that because the last church I was in used Tithely. We loved it. So also I would refer to, like Charlie and Kent have both said, there is on our website a letter by Andrew Warner which talks about extravagant giving, and it goes, he has a whole list of the different platforms that people can use for online giving, including a fee schedule. Now, the fee schedule is probably a little bit off because a number of those platforms have adjusted their rates due to the coronavirus. But the essential part is you should check out each one to see which fits best with your church. It's a very specific situation, and not, I know a number of churches use Vanco, a number of them use Tithely, a number of them use PayPal, but there are also other ways for people to give. So I checked that out by the letter that's up there by Andrew Warner, and just talking. And just wanted, last point is, as Charlie said, it's the way of the future. If we look at generational giving, if you look at the millennials, they give, like Angie said, she only writes one check, and that's to the church. All of our future giving is going to be, and Mary too, is all going to be online and electronic giving. They don't write checks anymore.
And let me just add to that. My congregation just started offering online giving in the last, I want to say 2 weeks. And I immediately went to the website and fulfilled my quarterly pledge to the church. I was so excited to be able to do it and do it with a credit card. I think something that's really important for folks to remember when they're thinking about whether or not to offer online giving, and of course you should offer online giving, is that a lot of people want to pay for things with their credit card right now because they can earn points, or they can earn cash back, or there is some sort of incentive to the person who is using their card. And sometimes they want to pass that incentive on to their church. So they may earn cash back, and then because they're earning cash back, they might be willing to pay a slightly higher gift to the church. So making it easy for people to give using their credit card is a really smart strategy for increasing both the immediacy of people being able to give, and also potentially increasing the amount that they're willing to give.
And the regularity, because once you set up an online recurring gift, it's like, even if you haven't gone to the gym in months, you're still paying the gym.
Yep.
Yes, I realize I'm still paying the gym.
Yeah.
I said that. Yeah. So
I've used that before pandemic time, but now it really
that's right. It's one of those things. But those workers are needing to get paid, and at my gym, at least, I think they're not furloughing the workers there. Several questions, kind of technical. Some have been answered by people typing in answers from the panel. Are there any churches that we know of using Zelle, Z-E-L-L-E. Is that a platform that others are aware of? Like, I'm not getting any yeses from the panel. That doesn't.
My
I haven't
understanding
had a
is that
chance to
that's
check.
specific to a bank. So
Now,
Zelle
is
is a
that-
service offered by TD Bank, I think.
A number of banks use it. It's an interbank transfer. I haven't had a chance to check it out. I use Zelle to transfer money to my daughter. Okay. So I'm quite familiar with it, but I don't know. I would imagine you would have to know the routing and the account number at the destination church to be able to have that. But I can check, and if that person will email me tomorrow, I'll have an answer for them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. How about this question? Do you recommend having more than one online option? This church uses PayPal and the online giving option in Breeze Church Management Software. Is that enough is the question. Lee?
So I would add that if you want to do some fundraising in a different way than having, a yearly contribution, but something more like a fundraising event or something to replace an in-person event that your church would have been having, I highly recommend Facebook. Something like 70% of adults use Facebook, and of those adults, 75% are using it every day. Most of the workshops that I've presented on fundraising at our Super Saturdays, I've heard from folks that, yes, their church has a Facebook presence, and most people are using Facebook. So I highly recommend the Facebook fundraisers. Not only can you raise money and there's no fee if you're a nonprofit, but it also serves as a friend raiser. So more people are hearing about what you are doing. There's quite a broad reach. It's easy to share. People are able to show what they're doing, and a lot of the millennial generation, that is how they give. So they're not giving, one big chunk to one area. It's lots of different things. So, do something appealing, something a little bit fun, lighthearted, possibly. I just participated in a virtual 5K race because we're not doing it all together, but I still felt that sense of community. And I was able to raise some money, and people who I thought would not make a donation to me, they saw it and made a donation. So highly recommend checking out Facebook. I'm sure some of you have seen what the conference did for our RIP medical debt appeal. There was a pajama challenge. Somebody on your screen here wore 4 sets of wonderful pajamas and raised a lot of money for a good cause.
Just a word follow-up on Facebook. If you are going to go in that direction, the nice thing about it is if you are a nonprofit registered, there is no finance charge. There's no overhead charge. What you raise out of finance fundraisers, 100% goes to the nonprofit. Now, there is a process you have to go through, and that's an application process. So if you're interested, you can certainly Google search Facebook nonprofit donations, and they'll give you the documentation that's required in order to be listed as a nonprofit organization. We also had, go ahead, David.
Oh, I was just going to go one more thing about the online giving, and this is more a generational thing. You could consider adding texting to give. A lot of younger people especially use their phones and have a number to text to give in addition to the online platforms, or using QR codes on your publications and things like that. Those are alternative ways that people can use to give electronically that's not necessarily online.
And even though it was answered, I'd point out the question about, is anyone registered to receive funds through Smile on Amazon? And the answer is yes. Silver Lake Conference Center receives funds that way. It's another method of fundraising.